Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to our last Payroll Year End Part 1 webinar, which is all about installing your update and preparing for year end. We do also have Payroll Year End Part 2 sessions. These are running until the 15th of April, where we cover processing Payroll Year End itself, start to finish. And something new that we're doing this year as well is actually running even more webinars themed around common topics over payroll year end. So this is covering things like directors' national insurance, corrections over year end, plus lots more. So more information on those at the end of the session. But my name's Alice. As you can see, I'm joined by my colleague Duncan. We're both your hosts and presenters for the session. And we are joined by some of our colleagues in the background too, who are going to be hard at work answering your questions. A little look at what we're covering today too. So Duncan will begin with an introduction, so your payroll year end key dates and deadlines to be aware of, plus what we've got in store for both of the webinars. I'll then come back to cover installing a year end update. So this will include some top tips for a smooth installation for this one, and of course to bear in mind for future updates too. I'll then pass back to Duncan to cover preparing for year end. So this is mainly just finishing payroll for 24-25, but it does also include information on whether you've got a week 53, directors, if you've got any directors on your payroll, and just generally getting ready for payroll year end itself. So everything you'll need to know about that. And then as always, we will finish with some further support and some more time to continue answering your questions as well. But with that being said, I will now pass over to Duncan to take you through that introduction. So it's over to you, Duncan.
Thank you so much, Alice. So I'm going to start things off with an introduction when I'm going to run through your payroll year-end key dates and deadlines. So we're going to do this across a timeline, which is going to start back on the 24th of February, which was the date that we released your payroll year-end update. So it has been available now for nearly a month. But about a week after that original release, we did release a new build of the software, which just fixed a couple of minor issues experienced by a small number of employees. Customers, I should say, not employees. The 5th of March was the date that that update became mandatory. So what this means is when you try to log into your payroll, if you haven't already installed this update, you will be prompted to do so. And that would install version 31.00. 231. Now, just to make you aware, since then we have released a background update which will install silently without any interaction from you. So over the next few weeks, you may notice that your version number changes to 31.00.236. But as I say, that's not a full installation, it's a background update, and Alice will be showing you where to check that you've got background updates switched on later in the demo. So I imagine most of you here will have completed the installation, and the next key date on the timeline is the 5th of April. Now that is the last day of the current tax year, 2024-25, and by that date, you should have completed payroll for your last pay date of the tax year and have submitted your FPS for that pay date. Any pay date that lands on the 6th of April or later falls into the new tax year, 2025-26. So there are some steps you'll need to complete to get ready for the new tax year, which we do cover in part 2 of these webinars. The other dates to be aware of are deadlines. So we have the 19th of April, and this is the deadline to do your final submission of the tax year. Now that's a step you'll complete as part of the year-end process, and it is separate from your last FPS and EPS for month 12. Keep in mind that is a deadline date, so there's nothing stopping you sending that final submission as soon as you're ready. And the other one is the deadline to issue P60s, and that will be the 31st of May. So you need to make sure all employees that were employed by you as at the 5th of April receive their P60 no later than that date. And again, you can get them distributed just as soon as you are ready to do that. So just to explain what we cover in the webinars, in this session today, we will focus on installing the update and preparing for year end, so completing that final pay run of 2024-25. And if you can join us for part 2, that is when we cover all of the steps of the year end process and what you'll need to do to start your payroll in 2025-26. So you can get yourself signed up from our help centre. So that's it for the key dates. I'd now like to pass back to Alice, who's going to run us through installing the year-end update. So back to you, Alice.
Thank you, Duncan. So as Duncan said, this update is to version 31 of Sage 50 Payroll. And just to help you get ready to install the update, we've put together a bit of a checklist of best practice for you. This is just going to help to ensure that it goes as smoothly as possible. Now, I know with the update being mandatory now, you won't be able to do some of these steps ahead of installing, and some of you might have actually already installed, but they're still really important points to consider for future updates too. And don't panic if you've not done any of these steps, you are still able to install the update without doing these. So first on the list of preparing to install is optimizing your data. So this is like a little spring clean for the payroll. It's a data management tool, and it's just going to help to make sure that everything's where it needs to be, tidies up the data too, and kind of helps to make the program run as smoothly as possible. You can run the optimize whenever you'd like, but the only thing is you can't optimize the company that you're currently logged into. And I'll be showing this in a demonstration shortly. Next thing to consider is checking your program directory, basically just to make a note of this from helping about. And this is so you can confirm which files are updated during the installation process. Now you can also check the program directory outside of the program, and you can do that by right-clicking the Sage 50 Payroll shortcut that's on your desktop, clicking Properties, and then making a note of the target file path in there. So if you can't access your company because it is prompting you to update, for example, you are still able to check the program directory for this step outside of the program. As I say, just by clicking on that shortcut, right-clicking, going to Properties, and then just making a note of that target file path. Next thing here is checking the automatic updates are switched on. And what this is going to allow is for Payroll to check for any updates in the future and prompt you to get these downloaded and installed. Now just bear in mind though, there are some external things which can affect the automatic updates working as normal. So if you've got any antivirus software or firewalls installed, this can have an effect on it. But don't worry, because if you can't use the automatic updates for any reason, you can actually opt to check for the updates manually instead. And you can either prompt that check manually in Payroll, or of course, you've always got the option of going to the Help Centre as well for any updates. And then last thing on this checklist is to back up your payroll data. So preferably onto something like a USB stick or something external to your computer, maybe even like a OneDrive or a SharePoint. Super important all year round to back up your data. We always talk about that in the webinars, but especially around installations and payroll year end. If anything does go wrong, having backup files saved just means that you have your data secure elsewhere. And if you need to restore that data into Payroll and kind of pick up where you've left off, you can do. So it just helps to kind of have a little bit of extra security there as well. So very important to take backups. Little tip from us as well is to name your backups appropriately. For example, before you updated Payroll to version 31, I would advise to take a backup and then call it something like pre-install version 31. And that way you know exactly what that backup is and kind of when you took it as well. But let's go to a demonstration of each of these preparation steps. I'm just going to bring up Payroll. And that first step was to optimize your data. So this is a process that you'll go through when you're opening the program and you're logging into your company, so with your username and password. When you're on that screen and you're entering those login details, there is an optimize button there, so you can optimize kind of as you're logging into the company. But as you can see, I'm already logged into Payroll, so the other option that I've got is to go to File and Open Company. So you can only do this for one company at a time, and as I said on the slide, you can't do it for the company that you're currently logged into. So this little asterisk symbol on the left here, this is just letting me know which company I'm currently logged into. And if I did try to optimize this one, you'll see I do get an error message there because it's being used. It's already, I'm already logged into it. But just to show you on another company, let me just select a different one. If I click optimize, the Payroll just does that for you, kind of works through and optimizes the data, and then brings up a message to say that the data has been optimized. So nice and quick. It does only normally take a couple of seconds there. Could take up to about a minute or so, just depending on a few factors, including how large your database is. Now, if I did want to optimize the company that I'm currently logged into, what I'd be able to do is just close down Payroll. And then as I open that back up and I'm logging into this company, I do have the same kind of optimize button at that point too. And something else to mention with optimizing, this is not just for installing updates. As I said, you could just optimize each time you open the program just to keep Payroll in the best working condition there. So that was optimizing your data, first step on that list there. And next step is checking the program directory. So all you really need to do for this is make a note of it, and you can do that in Help and About. And once this support information loads up, it's just the top left section that we're looking for, so the program details section. And the first directory in this list is the program directory. So just make a note of this. So I would note down that mine is a C drive, /program files x86, /sage payroll. And as I said, this is something that you can check for during the installation process. And if you can't access Help and About to check it in here, you can also access this from outside the program by right-clicking the Payroll shortcut on your desktop, clicking Properties, and then noting the target file path in there. So that is checking your program directory. Next thing to check is automatic updates. So you will find this option in Tools and Internet Options. So you do need an internet connection for this. But this is where you've got that choice of automatic or manual checks there for the updates. I've got mine set to automatic, and I would recommend this. What it's going to do is automatically check and prompt you to download any new updates for Payroll. But as I said, it can sometimes be affected by antivirus software and things that you might have installed. So other option that you've got in here is manual. Now obviously this won't automatically prompt you to download the updates, but if you've got it set to manual, you can kind of manually prompt that check by going to Help and Check for Updates. And that's just going to kind of prompt that check and let you know if there is anything new there. Now, since it is a mandatory update now, if we just go back to these options, what it's going to do is bypass this setting. So no matter what you've got selected in here, because it's mandatory, if you've not installed the update just yet, it will always show the message prompting you to install the update. And I'll show you that on the slides shortly. It also won't allow you to enter the program without updating. So this is just to help to make sure that you remain in compliant with any of the legislation changes. And then, of course, ready to go with Payroll Year End as well. Now, another setting that we would advise to check at this point is background updates. So as Duncan said, we have released a background update, which is to version 31.00.236. This is not something that you will need to install yourself. It is just going to install in the background, so nothing you need to do other than check that you've got background updates turned on. And you can do this in Tools and Background Updates. And all you need to do in here is just make sure that you've got this ticked. And then click OK. And if you do want to just double check whether Payroll's installed it yet for you, of course you can always check your version number by going to Help and About. And you've got that in the top left there. So you can see I'm still on 231. It's not quite done that background update yet for me, but yours could say 236 there. But that is just a few pieces of best practice for a smooth installation. Again, don't worry if you've not been able to do these. You can still install the update without doing them. And now that we've prepared to install, the next step would be to actually download that update. Now, as I said, since the update is now mandatory, if you haven't installed, what you'll see is this window on this slide. So this is just giving details of the version number and the option to install now. So this will need to be installed before you can enter your company. If it wasn't mandatory just yet, obviously, and you opted for automatic updates, you would see a similar message just prompting you to download. And then, of course, if you opted for manual, you could then prompt that check in Help and Check for Updates. But as we said, because it's mandatory, it does come up with this critical update window, regardless of your automatic update settings. And then, as always, you do also have the option of downloading from the Help Centre too. So if you go to our Payroll Year End Hub, which is sage.co.uk/PYE, you've got quick links to everything that you need for Payroll Year End, including this download, information on the background update, and all of the different steps around Payroll Year End as well. Now, whichever way you do it, once this new update is downloaded, you're going to make sure that everything is closed. So if Sage 50 Payroll is closed, any other Sage products that you've got with us is closed as well. If you do accidentally leave them open for the installation process, there will be a message come up to let you know that you'll need to close the programs. So don't worry too much about that. but the update won't be able to install until they're closed. You'll then be able to run the file which is downloaded. Now this will be an exe file, and once you do run that file, you'll see the messages on this slide. So that message on the left, this is just asking if you accept the license. So you'll just click accept license there, followed by a message confirming your program directory. This is why we advise to make a note of it, just to double check that the installation's picked up and detected the right program to update. Majority of cases this is yes, so mine is correct there. That is the file path that I selected, so that I noted down. So I'm just going to click yes at that point and let the installer do its thing. If it does come up with the wrong file path though, and it is different to the one that you noted down, just click no, and then you do have the option to browse to the file location that you noted down earlier. After this, the installer will do its thing, so just a case of waiting for that. It does normally only take a couple of minutes to get that installed, but it does depend on a couple of different factors, including how quick your computer is. So just a case of waiting for that to complete. And at this point, it is always worth mentioning, if you do run into any issues when you're installing, first thing that we would recommend is running that installation file as administrator. So that exe file that was downloaded, you can run that as administrator, and it's most commonly done by just right-clicking the file and then clicking Run as Administrator. This is just going to help to ensure that Payroll can install everything it needs to if there is anything kind of stopping that. Another thing as well that we'd advise, if you do have antivirus software installed, maybe just look into disabling that just to install the update, just in case that's blocking anything. Then once you've installed the update, of course, enable that again afterwards. And if there is a particular error message or something that you're getting when you're trying to install, best thing to do in this situation is make a word-for-word note of the error message, including any codes or numbers that it has, and then type that in on the Help Centre. 9 times out of 10, there is going to be a help article explaining exactly what it means, why it's happening, and then, of course, guiding you through the steps to fix that. And just a reminder, the Help Centre is sage.co.uk/help. Just a little bit of advice there if you do run into any issues. But once you do have Payroll installed, and you've waited for that to complete, you will get this message there to say Sage 50 Payroll's been successfully updated. And before you continue, it does recommend to save any work that you've got and restart your computer. Now, don't worry if you can't do that immediately, just kind of when you get a couple of minutes to do so, we would recommend just to restart your computer there. But other than that, that is the update all installed. So first thing that we'd advise that you do after you've installed the update is to just log back into Payroll. And when you open the program for the first time and you log into your company, what Payroll's going to do is automatically update and optimize the data for that company. So as you can see on that screenshot on the right, you'll get that message pop up. And this is just upgrading that payroll data for the company to version 31. So once it's done that and you're in the program, you're in your company, we then advise just going to Help and About and just double check that that version number is either version 31.00.231, as you can see on that screenshot, or with that background update version 31.00.236. So either of those version numbers are absolutely fine. But after this, you'll be kind of ready to go with preparing for your end itself. One more thing to mention before we pass back to Duncan, and this is actually on network installations. So if you have other colleagues who do Payroll and you've got Payroll installed on multiple computers, just to let you know, each computer that has Payroll installed must also be updated to version 31 as well. So once the first computer upgrades to version 31, when they open the program, remember, as I just showed you there, that Payroll data is also upgraded to version 31. So if another colleague tried to open Payroll on a different computer and they've not updated, they will see an error message, and it'll be something like the one on this slide. Now, all this is letting you know is that the company's data itself has been upgraded to that new version, version 31. It isn't able to be opened in like a lesser or a lower version. And it is a simple fix for this. You just need to make sure that everyone who has Payroll installed installs version 31. So every computer needs to be on the same version. So just a quick note on network installations there. But that does bring us to the end of installing. As I said, it's now time to pass back to Duncan, who's going to cover preparing for your end. So it's over to you, Duncan.
Thank you, Alice. So you've just seen there some great tips on installing updates. And as Alice says, if you didn't manage to do any of that before the last update, it's certainly something to think about for the next one. Now, what I'm going to focus on is the steps to prepare for a successful payroll year end. And this is very much centered around completing your payroll for 2024 to 25. So I'm going to be working through a checklist. So let's take a look at the steps that we'll cover. So our first step will be to check if we have a week 53 for this tax year. Now that step only applies if you pay your employees weekly, fortnightly, or 4-weekly. If all of your staff are paid monthly, you never have a week 53, and you can just move straight on to step 2. Now, step 2 will be to process and update records for your final pay period in 2024 to 25. Step 3 will be to process leavers if they have a leaving date before the 5th of April and they've received their final pay. Step 4 is to send your FPS for your last pay date of the year and EPS for month 12 if required. And then last but not least, step 5 is to ensure you have an up-to-date backup of your payroll data. So let's start things off with week 53. Now, if you run a weekly, fortnightly, or 4-weekly payroll, we always recommend that you check if you will have a week 53 in the current tax year. And the reason a week 53 comes about is that the number of days in a year doesn't divide into an exact number of weeks. So in 2024 to 25, there were 365 days. When you divide that by 7, you get 52 full weeks, but there is one extra day. And if your pay date happens to land on that extra day, that is when you end up with a week 53. And it's called this because if you paid weekly, that would be your 53rd payment of the year. Now, yes, this year, it will only happen if your regular pay date falls on Saturday, the 5th of April. Now, it is the pay date that's key. It doesn't matter what dates you're paying your employees for or the dates that they worked. It's the date that they received their pay that determines the tax period and whether or not you have this week 53. Another way to look at it is if you review a tax calendar, and we have versions of the tax calendar that you can download from our help center. You'll see that the tax year always begins on the 6th of April, which was a Saturday in 2024. And you can see the tax weeks and tax months in this calendar. If I scroll all the way to the end of the tax year, you can see we've got 52 full weeks. And then we have this one extra day, Saturday, the 5th of April this year, that will result in a week 53. Now, if your pay date is any other day of the week, or you pay monthly, you will not have a week 53 this year, but you may have one if you're weekly, fortnightly, or 4-weekly in a future year. So if you have a week 53, there are special rules that apply around calculation of tax, but this all happens automatically. So all you would need to do to process a week 53 is to set your process date to the 5th of April, which will be your pay date. And then when you process your payroll, Sage Payroll will automatically apply a week 1 calculation to the tax, and that's all in line with HMRC guidance. So nothing else you need to do. You don't need to change tax codes or anything like that. You would just process as normal. Now, when you have a week 53, what often happens in the following tax year is that your employees would receive a P800 notice of underpaid tax. And that's because they've been given an extra week of free pay allowance, which is completely in line with HMIC guidance. But what they then need to do is to recalculate the tax, and it can sometimes result in a change of tax code further down the line. So if you've had a week 53 before and you've noticed P800s arriving with your employees, that would be the reason why. So once you've established whether you have a week 53 or not, you can then start focusing on completing your last pay run of the year. So we're going to do a demo for this. I'm just going to bring my slides down. We'll bring down that tax calendar, and I'm going to jump into Sage 50 Payroll. And for this demo, all of my staff are paid monthly, so I definitely don't have a week 53. And because I pay them on the last day of the calendar month, I know that my last pay date of 2024 to 25 will be the 31st of March. So I'm going to set my pay date as the process date, as I usually would. And I can then get on and process payroll in the normal way. Now, one thing to be aware of in the last period of the year is if you've got any directors and they've been set up on the pro rata basis, there will be a recalculation of their national insurance. And that's because under directors' national insurance rules, it does need to be calculated using an annual calculation come the end of the year. Now, looking at my employee list, I have one director in the list. And to check the director status, to see if they're on pro rata basis, you can have a look in the employee record. You can select the employment tab. And over here on the right-hand side, this is where it shows the director status. And for this employee, it is pro rata basis. So this means there'll be a recalculation of the national insurance in the final period of the year. But if I'd set them to annual basis, it means there's no recalculation because the NI is calculated on a cumulative basis throughout the year. So just something to be aware of because it can result in slight changes to the national insurance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my employees and I'm going to go straight into the enter payment screen. Now, because I have leavers and employees marked on hold in my list, I'm just going to click yes to deselect them, as I usually do, and then we can go ahead and enter the payments. So this was the director just receiving their usual salary. When I click on to save next, it does inform me that they've been recalculated on a year-to-date basis. So I can just click OK to that message. That moves on to the next employee, and we would work through entering payments in the normal way. Now, I just want to point out that I do have one employee not currently receiving a salary, because if we check the summary, she's on maternity leave and she's receiving statutory maternity pay. Now, this means that at the end of the tax month, I will need to send an EPS to reclaim that statutory payment, but that won't be my final submission of the year because that will be done separately when I complete year end. But I'm just going to go through and save the rest of the payments for my employees. You would then run the pension assessment if you use the pensions module, produce the usual reports such as payment summaries, upload the pay slips if you use online pay slips, and if you're happy with all of those payments, you can then finalize payroll by running update records. So I'm going to skip ahead to update records, clicking yes to continue. It's a perfect time to take your own pre-update backup. So you've got this backup option in the update records wizard. I'm just going to skip past it to save time. I can then work through the update records wizard. And when I click on to finish, it confirms that the employees have been updated. And it just reminds us to use the leaver wizard for anyone leaving before we complete our full payment submission. So now that I've updated records, I can review the last updated column, and it just confirms to me that for all my current active employees, they've now been updated for my last pay date of the year, which was the 31st of March. Now, before I move on to the next step, I do want to just come back to directors briefly, just to explain a bit more about that national insurance recalculation. So the rules for directors' national insurance are that by the end of each tax year, any director must have paid the correct national insurance based on their cumulative earnings and the annual directors' NI thresholds. Now, if you've got them set to the annual basis, this happens throughout the year, so it's always done on a cumulative calculation. However, if you've set the status to pro rata basis, this means that the director's national insurance has been calculated in the same way as a non-director, using weekly or monthly thresholds, and then needs to be recalculated in the last period of the year. So that's why we saw the message pop up telling us that they've been recalculated on a year-to-date basis. Now, for directors that earn about the same each period, you won't notice much of a change. But if there has been any variances in the pay throughout the year, you might find that the national insurance in the last period of the year is higher or lower than you normally expect it to be. So I just want to show you this example. This is a report for the director that we looked at in the demo. Their pay each month is usually just over £3,000 basic salary. But then in month 9, in December, they received a Christmas bonus. So they had a bit of a pay spike. And at the time, the national insurance contributions went up, as you'd expect them to. But for the employee national insurance, because the earnings in that month were way above the upper earnings limit, they will have paid a lot of that national insurance at the 2% rate. Now, when it's recalculated at the end of the year, looking at the annual earnings, which in this case is £46,300, that cumulative figure is actually less than the upper earnings limit for the annual bands. So in month 12, the employee's national insurance has increased considerably because they are now paying the national insurance that was due on that bonus they received in December. So come the end of the year, they'll have paid exactly the same amount of national insurance as they would have done on the annual basis. It's just when it's been paid is determined by the status. And it's why if the earnings are going to vary, many directors might choose to be on the annual basis to avoid any surprises at the end of the year. So that is a little bit on directors. We do explain more on this in our Directors NI webinar, so do join us for that if you can. But let's just return to the demo, moving on to our third step, which is to process any leavers. Now, usually when an employee is leaving, once you've updated their final payment, you would then run the leaver wizard, which produces a P45. And then when you send your FPS, it will include the leaving details in that submission. And that's exactly what I did for one of my employees who left back in December. So 31st of December was their last payment. And checking the current status, I can see that they are already a leaver. So there's nothing I need to do for that employee who left earlier in the year. Now, if I know that I've just paid someone for the last time and they're leaving, I would need to run the leaver wizard now before I send my FPS for this pay date so that they can get their P45 and the leaving details can be submitted. Now, if someone's leaving, but they're not going to be paid until the new tax year, you will need to wait until you've updated records for that final payment before you run the leaver wizard. And if their leaving date is in the previous tax year, when you run the leaver wizard, you will need to set your process date back to the previous tax year in order to produce the P45. But now's a good time to review your employees, and if there is anyone that's been paid for the last time and who has not already been made a leaver, this is the time to run the leaver wizard so that you can get their details submitted by the end of the year. Now, actually, in this example, I don't have anyone else that's leaving. I do have an employee on hold, but that's because they're a seasonal worker. So they are going to come back to work for me in the new tax year. So nothing I need to do with them. I can leave them on hold. And then next time I need to pay them, that's when I would take them off of hold. So I'm just about ready now to do my FPS for my 31st of March pay date. So this is just sent in the usual way from my payroll tasks. So I'm going to go into full payment submission. Now it'll come up with the gateway registration and company details, which haven't changed. So I can click submit. And then it'll give me a summary of the submission. So including the tax period, the liability figures, and any starter or leaver details. But what this submission won't do is it won't be flagged as the final submission for the year. So this is completely normal. This will always say no for an FPS in Sage Payroll because we send your final submission separately as part of the year-end process. So all I need to do is to submit the FPS. That will be then sent to HMRC. And once that's been received, I should see my confirmation message on screen, like so. I can then close out of this step. And if I now review the last FPS date, I can see straight away that for all of my current employees, that now matches the last updated date. And that is my last pay date of the tax year. So I'm pretty much ready to move on to the year-end steps. But before I do that, the final step in the preparation checklist is to make sure I have an up-to-date backup of my payroll data. So as a reminder, to take the backup, go to the File menu and then select Backup. Takes you into the Backup wizard. You'd click onto Next, and we just suggest backing up the files selected automatically. So these files just here. You'd click Next again. This is where you can browse to a location for your backup, and you can give it a file name. So I might call this month 12 post update. And then when you complete the wizard, that creates a backup file, keeps all of your data safe, and could be restored if ever required in the future. So that was the final step. So just to remind you, when we submitted our FPS and EPS for month 12, that would not be flagged as your final submission. So you will be doing a separate submission as part of the year-end process. And actually, I forgot to do my EPS, so let me just go back and do that now. So because I had an employee where I recovered statutory pay, just looking at my P32 report for month 12, you will see that I'm recovering SMP this month. So if you make a recovery of statutory payments, you will need to send an EPS, so just a normal, regular EPS. So I can do that from e-submissions, employer payment summary, and then I would work through this wizard. So this will always show the tax year to date values for what you've recovered. So this is the statutory maternity pay that I've claimed for 2024 to 25. I've got no apprenticeship levy because I'm below the allowance. And then as you can see there, I would send through the EPS. This isn't the final one, so that's marked as no. But that just does submit the reclaim figures that I need to send to HMRC. So nearly forgot that step, but there it is, the employer payment summary. So a quick look through the full checklist. We've checked if we had a week 53. It only applies to weekly, fortnightly or 4-weekly if your pay date will fall on Saturday the 5th of April. We processed and updated the final pay period of 24-25. You can check if you've done that by looking down the last updated column. We've processed any leavers that have left and received their final pay. We've submitted the FPS for our last pay date. We've just done the EPS for month 12, and we've made sure we have a backup of the payroll data. So there is just one last thing to think about when preparing for year end, and that will be how you're going to do your P60s for any current employee. So you will need to give a P60 to anyone who's employed by you as at the 5th of April. And the way that you would do this would usually follow the same method as your pay slips. So the three options are: you can upload online P60s, either to Sage HR online services or to the online bureau portal if you're an accountant. You can email P60s, and it will use the same settings as email payslips, so the same password and the same mail provider. Or you can print your P60s directly onto plain paper. So there's no stationery required. You can't even get stationery from Sage or HMRC, but you still have the option of printing them, and it will print all the template and background for you. So we cover this in more detail in part 2, but what we'd just like to do before we go into the further support is to ask you a quick question. So we're going to run a poll on screen to find out how you are planning to produce P60s this payroll year end. So I've given you 4 options to choose from, and you can choose more than one if you're going to be mixing and matching. So are you planning to print your P60s? Will you be doing email P60s? Will you be uploading online P60s to Sage HR or to Online Bureau? Or are you undecided? So we've got a 4th option if you're not sure. So I will share the overall results of the poll. So it's quite interesting to see how people produce these forms these days. I think we've seen a shift over the years to the more digital versions. But we'll leave that open a few more seconds just to give you a chance to vote. And then we'll take a look at the results. So it's looking quite close today, actually. So let's take a look at those results now. So most popular option is online P60s with 49% of votes. In second place, just is email P60s with 34%. And then in third, we've got the printed P60s with 33%. So thanks for joining in there. As I say, it's always interesting to see that. And we cover all of these options when we go through the year-end process in part 2. So that's about it for the presentation, but let's bring Alice back to run through further support before we take a look at some of your questions. So back to you, Alice.
Thanks, Duncan. Yeah, we do have loads of amazing support available to you. So while we go through that, if you do have any more questions for the Q&A, please just get those in there. What we'll be doing is answering them for a little bit longer. And we are also going to pick out some questions to answer live shortly, so stay tuned for those. But first thing, just to make you aware of, is the webinars that we're covering. So obviously we've got that part 2 webinar for payroll year-end. So that's going to cover processing year-end step by step, including that final submission that we've been talking about, and producing the P60s as well. So just kind of helping you understand those different steps. It does also help you to understand any new changes to the programme and new legislation that's coming in the 25-26 tax year. Loads of dates and times available for this session right through until the 15th of April. So you've got until then to come along and attend that webinar. As I mentioned at the start, we have decided to add more sessions this year as well to help you with more kind of common topics, I suppose, over payroll year end. So things we get like lots of queries on at this time of year. So we've got like corrections at year end, starters and leavers, directors national insurance. We've also got online pay slips and P60s. So if you are kind of curious what that is and you want a bit more information, that session will cover all of that too. Would love to see you at some of these sessions though, so head to sage.co.uk/webinars to read a little bit more about what's coming up and secure your spot as well. We've also got the Sage Help Centre, so this is sage.co.uk/help. You can access all of the support guides and things that you need from here, demonstration videos as well. We've got a webinar section which will have all of the previous recordings to the sessions that we've run. And if you do need to get into contact with us for any reason, if you need technical support, for example, you do have those contact options there too. We also have a Sage University, so this is sageu.com. Here you can access free e-learning courses. You can set up a free account as well. You've also got the option of bite-sized learning, so a little bit shorter. And if you do complete this training, you do actually earn some certifications for the training too. So a great way to expand your knowledge on Sage 50 Payroll if that's something you want to do. Or if you've got other products with us and you want to learn a bit more about them, it's not just Sage 50 Payroll that it has training on. So definitely have a look at that. Yeah, that is sageu.com. And then last thing that I do want to make you aware of that we're offering this year is our bespoke one-to-one services. So if you do feel that you need a bit more one-to-one support with payroll in general or over payroll year end, for example, I would highly advise getting more information on these. Now, they do tailor the sessions completely to what you need. So whether you need help with pensions or processing, payroll year end or HMRC submissions, etc., they will be able to kind of support you with what you're kind of requesting help with. And it is one-to-one, so really great option there. The team who provide these sessions are some of our colleagues here at Newcastle. They're really great at what they do. I just want to make this clear, though, it is a chargeable service. So there is an extra charge to this. But what we're going to do is launch a poll on your screen shortly. And if you are wanting a bit more information, if you just want to kind of know a bit more about it, how much it might cost you, we'll launch this poll and you can select yes to that and submit your response. And one of my colleagues will be able to reach out and kind of get the ball rolling with that. So let me just launch this poll on your screen. I'll leave that open for a couple of minutes, and while that's running, what me and Duncan are going to do is just go onto mute. We're going to select some of the questions that you've been answering and then come back to answer these live. So yes, stay tuned for a couple of minutes. We'll go and pick these questions and then we'll come back to have a kind of live Q&A with you. So see you in a moment. Hello everyone, that is just us back again. Thank you for all of the questions that you've been sending in. It looks like the team have been providing some good answers to them, but we have picked out a few to just answer now live around some of the kind of more common topics, I suppose. So we'll cover these before we kind of end the webinar. And thank you as well to those of you replying to the poll. If you did respond yes, just kind of keep an eye on your inbox and things, and one of my colleagues will be able to reach out and kind of provide more information on that one-to-one support option. But in terms of the questions, I've picked out 3 for you, Duncan, if that's okay. First one I've got for you, this is, my work week ends on the 6th of April, so will this be week 1 for the 25-26 tax year?
Okay, so the key thing to remember here is it doesn't matter what dates you're paying an employee for or the dates that they worked, it's the date that they receive their pay that determines the tax period. So if the pay date was the 6th of April, that's the first day of the new tax year, that would be week 1 in 2025 to 26. So any date 6th of April or later falls into the new tax year, but that's the date they receive the pay. It's not the date that they did the work. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does, thank you for that. Question 2 that I've got for you, this is to do with people on hold. A couple of questions came in on this. So I have a number of staff members on hold. Should I take them off hold to process payroll year end?
Okay, and that is a common question. The answer to that is no. You only need to take them off hold when they next need to be paid. So as long as they have been paid at least once in the tax year, they will still get a P60. So that'll still be produced for them as part of the year-end wizard. There's no need for you to take them off of hold or to process a payment for them if they haven't worked and they don't need to be paid. One thing I would say is that when you move into the new tax year, for anyone that's marked on hold, they will pop up to be included in your first FPS of the new tax year as an irregularly paid employee. So that just submits their details to HMRC saying that they're still employed by you, but just not working currently. And then when you do need to pay them the next time, take them off hold then, and then they can be included in a normal FPS. So yeah, leave them on hold over year end.
Perfect, thank you so much for that. And the last one that I've picked for you, Duncan, this is, how do I handle a leaver who left in March but is getting paid in April for their March hours?
Yeah, again, another common one, and I think we briefly covered this in the demo. So the rule around leavers is that when you produce the P45, it must show the actual date they left your employment. So in this case, in March, and it should also show the year-to-date values for the tax year that they left. Now, it's quite common for them to be paid in the new tax year if they're leaving towards the end of a tax year. So in this scenario, you would need to wait until you have processed and updated records for their final payment, which will be week 1 or month 1 in the new tax year, whenever you're paying them. And to make them a leaver and produce the correct P45, you first change your process date back to the previous tax year. So you could use the 5th of April or the date they actually left. You then run the leaver wizard, produce your P45 to give to the employee. And then when you come back to send the FPS in the new tax year, that will then submit the leaving details to HMRC. So HMRC will still know about the pay they've received in the new tax year. And if it was needed, HMRC would deal with any kind of change of tax code with the new employer. But we've got a great guide actually in the Help Centre that walks you through that step by step.
I was just going to mention that as well, thank you. Yeah, that's all the questions that I picked out of you, Duncan.
Great. Well, I've got a few for you. So we've had quite a few actually today on the background update. So we know that if you've got that enabled, it should install silently in the background. But is it possible to install that background update manually?
It is, yeah. So I did show you earlier that you could check in tools and background updates to kind of tick that box and then get the update installed in the background. And that's, you know, you won't have to do anything in that situation. You've got that option and it will just kind of install in the background over the coming weeks. But same as all of the updates that we release, you do have the option to go to the Help Centre and do that manually. So I just want to show you where this is actually, if I bring up the article. So for this, I just typed in version 31 background update, and this is one of the search results that comes up. So this is the one that you'll need, of course, with that new version number. This is going to go through everything that you need. So what the background update is, obviously that check which I told you to do in tools and background updates. So just checking that that's enabled. But if you scroll down, if you do want to download it manually, you do have that download link there. So same as other updates, you would just click to download to begin the download there for the update. And yeah, you can absolutely get that downloaded and installed manually. That's absolutely fine.
Great. And one thing just to mention, if you do install it manually, you won't see the usual wizard screens because it's designed as a background update. You won't see anything happen on screen, but then when you next go into the program, the version will have updated. But more info in that guide. Next one, this is around the optimize option, so maybe a bit of a technical one, but people are asking what optimizing the data actually or physically does.
Yeah, of course. So the technical answer for this is that the optimize routine will rebuild all of the indexes in the database. It then compresses it to reduce the amount of disk space that it uses. So it doesn't change or remove any of your payroll data, but what it does do is just help to reduce the size of your backups. It just helps to maintain like organized and error-free data. So it does improve reporting in the program and then also performance as well. So it can just help to make the program run really smoothly. Just want to point out as well, optimizing isn't just for installs. Obviously, we mentioned it as a preparation to install, but you can optimize whenever you'd like. Best practice from us really would be to optimize each time that you log into your company. Only takes a couple of seconds. But yeah, as you're entering your username and password, just click optimize at that point to kind of keep payroll running in the best condition, really.
Great stuff. And last one for you, Alice. How can we check what version we are currently running?
Yeah, so best place to do this would be in Help and About. And it's just going to be the same section that we checked for the program directory in. So top left, program details section. First thing in that list actually is the current version number. So you just want to make sure that this is either version 31.00.231 or version 31.00.236. And either of those are going to be the correct version number. You'll have everything you need in those, and you will be ready to process payroll year end, and you'll have all of the new legislation for the new tax year as well. So just in Help and About.
Perfect. And that's all I had for you.
Yeah, no, thank you for those. Looks like we're pretty much out of time anyway, so I think we'll leave it there for questions. But if you do have any last minute ones, we do still have a couple of minutes to kind of answer those. So we'll leave the webinar open a little bit longer and then of course close it once there are no more. If you are leaving us now, I just want to say thank you for joining us today. And a reminder, if you do want to keep any of the Q&A, if you found any of those particularly helpful, do feel free to copy and paste these into something like a Word document to keep for future reference. One last ask from us as well, you will see a short survey as you exit the webinar, so if you just have a moment to fill that out, or if you've got any comments to leave about the webinar or about me and Duncan today, we would really, really appreciate that. The feedback does go a long way, so thank you in advance for that. But yeah, that is it from us really. So on behalf of me and Duncan and our colleagues behind the scenes, enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you so much for joining us. As I said, I will leave the webinar open just to get those last answers out to you. But other than that, that is us done. So thanks again for joining us, and it is goodbye for now.